Yes, it is 2025, and I'm sitting here reviewing a bike that was originally launched back in 2022. This, in my opinion, is one of the coolest aero bikes ever made. This is the Trek Madone Gen 7. Let's talk about it. This is not a bike that Trek sells anymore as a complete bike. However, they do still sell the frame set of this bike, which you can buy and build it up to your liking. The new Gen 8 Madone, I'm personally just not a fan of. I just don't think it was ever really meant to be a Madone. I think that new Gen 8 was always supposed to be the Amanda, but they just put some Aero water bottles on it and said, hey, look, it's the new Madone. So I don't know. This bike here to me is kind of one of a kind, and it's really a shame that Trek got rid of it. But as I mentioned, you can still get a frame set. That's what I did here. This is a bike that I built up with my dad, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how it rides. So as usual, I'm going to look today at sort of the frame and the quality of the frame, the specs and features, that kind of thing. Then we're going to look at the ride quality, and then lastly, we'll check out the weight. So stay tuned for that. All right, guys, jumping right into it. So frame. First off, as I mentioned, the looks. I mean, this thing just looks awesome. The Trek Madone Gen 7, in my opinion, is one of the coolest looking bikes ever produced, and this bike was offered in some really great paint jobs. Of course, you guys know the main thing with this Madone is the ISOFlow in the back, so that was kind of its like flagship feature. So it's going to have this cutout in the back, which Trek claims adds a lot of compliance, so that's going to be useful when you're running over some bumpy roads or, you know, questionable surfaces. That's going to really help smooth that out. It also helps with the aerodynamics as the air sort of passes through the cutout here. But what's cool about this frame too, I think more so than the ISOFlow, is the tire clearance. So Trek says that the maximum tire clearance on this bike is 32 millimeter. I am currently running 32 mil tires on this bike, and I actually think you could probably get away with like 33. As you can see, there's a little bit of extra room there, but 32 is perfectly fine, and I probably wouldn't go more than that. But the ISOFlow plus the wide tire clearance makes this bike really a dream to ride, and we'll talk more about that in the ride quality section of this video. Of course, you're going to have the super deep head tube in the front, and then the down tube that kind of connects the head tube to the rest of the bike is going to be fairly deep as well. You have this nice beautiful Trek logo on there. I love how they make this logo centered. That plus, you know, the deep fork is really going to make this bike just soar through the air. Everything about this bike just really fits the mold of what an aero bike should be, in my opinion. The bottom bracket area, as you can see, is very big, a very stiff bike, a lot of really excellent power transfer there. We'll talk about that in the ride quality section, but again, it's really just hitting all the marks for a proper aero road bike. Let's look at the handlebar now, because the handlebar on this I love. The reason is because most bikes from most brands ship handlebars that are just way too wide, and it drives me absolutely crazy. What I love about the Trek Madone is that they get their handlebar sizing, in my opinion, just right. So this bike originally shipped with a 39 centimeter handlebar for a 58 size bike. Now, when you buy the frame, you don't get a handlebar, so unfortunately that doesn't really matter anymore. But at the time, it just kind of shows you how dialed in Trek really shipped these bikes from the factory, because most bikes at the time were just shipping with handlebars way too wide. But this handlebar is awesome. It feels really perfect. It's nice and flat and aero. You really just feel like dynamite when you're grabbing this handlebar and just blasting the watts out. It's really great. Now, the new Gen 8 Madone does sort of carry on the same tradition, where it's going to utilize a narrower set of handlebars than most of the industry will ship with. So that is good. But of course, now there's the whole thing with the UCI banning, what is it, anything less than 39 millimeters or centimeters rather. I think they even banned 39 centimeters too, which is just crazy. And I hope they revoke that soon enough, because that's just totally ridiculous. But in any case, I guess if you do buy the Gen 8 Madone and you're getting as high as 58 and it ships with the 39 centimeter handlebar, you're gonna have to swap that out if you want to race, but you know, that's dumb. So hopefully they take it back. I will say, when putting this bike together, the downside with the handlebar, you guys know it's integrated. That comes with a huge swath of problems when it comes to serviceability. Assembling this bike was very difficult. Getting the wires actually through the handlebar took my dad and I like 2 hours to do it. We eventually got it, but I've worked with other more easy to use one-piece handlebars. But I would not purchase this handlebar unless you were really certain of your bike fit, because this does cost like over $700, and you really can't change it unless you're willing to just toss it out and get a brand new one. But what's cool with the Trek Madone, you guys, is you do not have to use this handlebar. So if you buy the frame, you could put any handlebar you wanted to on there. You could put any stem you wanted to on there, so you don't have to buy expensive components. This will work with, cheaper components. The frame's fairly expensive, so you could grab something a little bit cheaper and test out your bike fit and it'll be just fine. Okay, so let's talk about the seat post then. So the seat post is actually really good. So what's cool about this seat post is you have two adjustment areas. You have one screw where you can adjust the fore aft position, and then you have another screw in the back that you can adjust the tilt. Now, a lot of seat posts from various bike brands, you have to make both of those adjustments simultaneously. You usually have like one or two screws that control the whole thing, and that can be really difficult if you just want to change one piece of the fit. You end up changing several pieces at the same time because you have to. This is really cool how it isolates that, and it makes changing your fit so easy as you dial it in on your first few rides. I really, really love that. Now, you adjust the seat post with this little screw in the back. Basically, you just tighten the screw in the back here, but if your optimal position kind of lands where this bridge sits between two sides of the seat post, then you kind of have to fiddle with it and put the screw in the top hole. You know what I mean if you buy this bike. It's totally fine. It's just kind of one of those things where it's probably could have been done a little bit better, but in any case, I think it works fine. I have heard some riders say that on some dusty or muddy days, the rear tire can actually fling some dirt and gunk up into this area here. I've never had that happen personally, but you could always put some electric tape there or something just to kind of cover it up, but I think it's probably fine. But I have heard some riders complain about that. Now, the frame set of the bike, if you were to purchase the frame set alone, it does not actually include this seat post, so you're gonna have to buy it on your own. That seat post, I believe, costs a little over $300, so it's not super cheap. I wish they would just include it because it is proprietary, so it's not like you can buy a different seat post. I mean, you're gonna have to buy it anyway, so unlike the handlebar and stem, I can understand why they wouldn't include that because you could put anything on there, but with the seat post, you need to buy this specific seat post. So I wish when you purchase the frame set, they gave you that seat post because it's just gonna be something you gotta buy anyway, but whatever. I guess it is what it is. This is a zero offset seat post. That's kind of the new thing these days. If you have kind of longer legs and a short torso like me, you're probably going to want to have a little bit of a offset, maybe 10, 15 degrees. But nowadays on modern race bikes, we see more and more 0-degree offsets because that gets you more over the pedals, so you put out power a little bit more. But just understand that the compromise there is they're going to be more forward, so you're putting more weight on your wrists and your hands, which isn't really a problem if you're putting out like 300 watts in a race. But if you're just kind of cruising around town, this is probably too aggressive of a position, and you're probably going to want to put that seat back a little bit more. Let's talk sizing real quick. So I personally am 185 centimeters tall, and I have an 86.5 centimeter inseam. So I am directly in between sizes, between a 58 and a 60. I've tried both, and I would say, in my personal opinion, you're probably better off sizing up if you're in between sizes. And the reason I say that is because this is an aggressive bike. Most aero race bikes are pretty aggressive. What I've noticed from me personally is that I tend to do better with a higher stack versus a longer reach, meaning I am okay with a long reach, but I'm not usually okay with a low stack. It hurts my neck to have a low stack, but I don't mind reaching far. I just need to be able to be more upright. And the thing with the Trek Madone is that as you go up in size, the difference in reach is pretty small between sizes. So for example, from the size 58 to the size 60, the difference in the reach is about 3 millimeters, which really isn't a lot. But the difference in the stack between those two sizes is about 20 millimeters, which is a lot. But in any case, it is still at the end of the day an aero race bike. So it's going to be fairly aggressive, although I will say it's probably among the more comfortable aero race bikes I've ridden. I've gone out for pretty long rides and my pain is pretty minimal, so I think it's fine for longer rides, but don't expect like the comfort from like a Trek Madone, for example, on a Madone, because the purposes are just very different. All right guys, so how does it ride? Smooth, stable, and fast. Describes this bike perfectly. Super smooth. Part of that could be the ISO flow. I think a lot of it is the 32 mil tires. I mean, this thing just really feels like you're gliding on a cloud. Been going through lots of descents with some good amount of wind. Totally feels stable. Don't get that wobbly, shaky feel at all. Some of the earlier aero bikes in more early years, I used to freak out on those things because you get even a small amount of wind and it just feels like you're gonna fall off. Not on this one. So one thing that really stood out to me right away, and my dad as well, when we rode this bike, is it feels like you're just gliding on a cloud. Compare this to like older aero race bikes. For example, I have a 2020 Cervelo S3, and that bike, super cool, super fast, but man, I get pain sometimes just looking at that thing because it'll really beat you up. This thing, way more comfortable. Part of that, ISOFlow, perhaps that's part of it, but I think the other part of it too is the wide tire clearance. Those 32 mil tires plus the ISOFlow really just make this thing feel like a cloud when you're riding on it, but you don't lose the speed. This thing is a super fast bike, even on the hills too. Like there are some hills that I took this bike on and I was just blasting up like 20 miles an hour up the hill. I mean, it was like, you know, not a super steep hill, but a hill that I would usually maybe cruise at like 17, 18 miles per hour. This, I was hitting 20 fairly easily. I also just think the comfort really kind of allows you to put out that power without getting beaten up and fatigued. I took this on some of my main test loops and I was hitting, if not, you know, the same speed as any other race bike, I was maybe getting even a little bit better. This thing wants to go fast. I was holding 20 miles an hour in most cases pretty easily. Originally I kind of thought like those wide tires, those 32 mil tires were going to slow me down because they're just big and bulky and they're not very aerodynamic. But you guys, they don't slow me down whatsoever. And if you haven't done the wide tires yet, just do it, you guys. You gotta hop on the bandwagon. Trust me, I held out for so long and eventually I succumbed to the wide tires, and I'm so happy I did because my riding has just been so much better ever since. I could never imagine going back to 25 mil tires. I don't think I ever will. 32 for me is kind of the way to go, which is bonkers because like even like a year ago I would never have said that, but my experience has shown there's just no sacrifices in speed, at least not what I'm noticing. The handling of the bike is also really great. I love being able to just kind of toss this bike around underneath me and just dive into corners. The cornering is really good, and again, part of that I'd attribute to the wide tires, but part of it I think just the geometry. The handling just feels very confident. Also in the crosswinds I noticed no issues. I took this on a long ride by Lake Michigan where it's usually very windy, but this thing just, as far as I could tell, was completely unaffected by that. I don't know why this bike doesn't win more races. This, in my opinion, is probably one of the fastest bikes I've ever ridden. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you like, oh, I can definitely tell a difference between this aero bike and another one. Like, they're all pretty good these days, but what I can say is that this just feels like a awesome ride. One of the best riding bikes I've ever ridden, and I'm so happy to have this bike. So if you can get your hands on a frame set, I definitely would. You know, if you do, have fun building it. It's the frame is the canvas, as they say, and you can kind of build it up whatever you want to. My dad and I put SRAM Red on here. This is the brand new SRAM Red. We have some Fulcrum racing wheels on here. Those are super lightweight wheels. They weigh about 12 or 1300 grams as a pair. Let's hop on the scale really quick. Let's see how much this full setup weighs, and that'll be it. All right, guys, Trek Madone Gen 7 with SRAM Red, weighing in at 15.76 pounds, 7.15 kilos. That is pretty lightweight. That's the new SRAM Red, no pedals, one bottle cage, and a Garmin mount and a Vario mount on the back. So pretty lightweight for an aero race bike. All right, guys, that is my review of the Trek Madone Gen 7. Awesome bike. I really highly recommend it. This is one of the best bikes I've ever ridden. So if you can get your hands on a frame set, I definitely recommend you do it. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.